I was going to say, I was just going to change for a moment to the presentation, because I think, in view of that presentation, I think it would be good to hear from an energy producer. The message there is that if there's no problem relying on fossil fuels out to 2040, from what I hear from you, Monsieur Appert. In fact, perhaps far beyond. It's quite extraordinary what's happened, especially in the United States. But Total was going to talk to us about how their production techniques and everything else are consistent with the 2-degree limit, as I understand it, that we're trying to keep the temperatures under through reducing the CO2 into the atmosphere. So I think it would be good to hear from Total. And bear in mind, one thing that bothers me a little bit when I talk to some of my American friends, they say, well, there's no problem, we're going to be on natural gas. Well, I think as Total will point out, and as others, natural gas produces up to 50% of the CO2 that coal does. So, that's not a long-term solution to the problem. So why don't we hear from you, if I may, at this point, from Total. And I'd like to leave the technologies then. You want to hear from the G20, then the technologies. You're both going to discuss decarbonizing, and you're going to discuss nuclear. So I think that might be a better separation for these purposes. Okay. Try and keep it at 10 if you can.
All right. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you basically what we are doing at Total in terms of strategy and climate. And it's important to know that we have changed actually the organization of the company while joining strategy and climate, meaning that we want to integrate the climate aspect within the strategy of the company. As you can see on that slide, it's clear that oil and gas is responsible, I would say, for about 37% of the GHG emissions, and as a consequence, we consider that we are part of the problem, and then we should be part of the solution as well. In order to meet the 2 degrees Celsius target set by the IEA, meaning reducing the gigatons of CO2 being emitted from about 30 today to less or to 20 by 2040, there are 3 main ways that we identify in order to get there. The first one, clearly, is to have more renewable energy. It seems clear. The second one is to improve energy efficiency, and the third one is to optimize the energy mix that we have in our portfolio. And it's very clear that it is only by joining together the 3 different ways that we could be in a position actually to match, to meet the 2-degree scenario. One aspect which seems very important to us is gas, in particular compared to coal. It's clear that gas emits about half as less as coal when talking about power generation. So it is critical actually to increase the gas part for electricity generation compared to coal in order to improve the situation in terms of emission. Does that mean that we will not need any more oil and gas? Clearly, and I think that's been addressed already, the answer is no. By 2035, about slightly less than half of the need for energy will be provided by oil and gas, and so it remains absolutely key to continue producing oil and gas. And as a matter of illustration, you can see on that slide that for gas, for instance, given the natural decline of the fields in the years to come and the demand which is anticipated by IEA under this 2-degree scenario that you see, that's the red bar, still there are many new projects which have to come on stream in order to meet the demand for the future. So that's the case for gas. It is very clearly the case for oil as well, with even more investments being needed in the future for the demand to be met. At Total, the ambition is to be consistent with this IEA 2-degree scenario, and we intend to get there by combining many different actions. First, it's clear that we cannot do things just by ourselves. We need to work with governments and industry. We believe, we're strong supporter of having a price on carbon for economic decisions actually to be made, and the economic aspect is absolutely key when talking about the adaptation to climate change. We need to focus our oil and gas projects on projects with low break-evens, and that's clear that being very much involved in the Middle East and in this country in particular does help the case very much, because these countries do offer low break-even projects. Giving priority to gas, I mentioned it already, and this is linked to, for us, the decision to exit the coal business. And finally, growing low-carbon businesses is also one area that we decided to focus on. When talking about gas, I think we have to include also in our strategy not only the switch towards gas, but we need to be very careful about the problem of methane emissions, which, as you know, methane has more impact than CO2 even as GHG. And so we take with a lot of importance, I would say, the fact that we should help and try to better measure methane emission in order to be in a position to tackle this specific issue in the future. Price of carbon, for us, we do take, when assessing the value of projects, we take a $30 to $40 per ton price of carbon in order, even though that's not necessarily the price that we would be paying because the market is not there at that time, but in order to prepare ourselves and to be in a position to compare projects one with the other, assuming that the CO2 content associated with these projects would be taxed. I mentioned that we cannot do things just by ourselves. You see here on that slide that we're partner of many different organizations. The only one I would like to indicate here is the OGCI, which is a kind of original organization between oil and gas companies, NOCs and IOCs. And it's interesting to note that our companies, very often being competitors, can also actually be partners, and in particular, through the OGCI and this new OGCI climate investment, where we decided to dedicate all of the 10 companies, $1 billion being invested in the next 10 years in order to deliver practical solutions to climate risk, is a good example of how the industry can cooperate together. Another aspect which seems important when we look at all the different possibilities in order to tackle the issue of climate change is carbon capture, usage and storage. A lot of research is being done, money is being spent in order to improve what we can do in terms of CCUS, not only for the capture and storage, but also for the usage of CO2 in terms of chemical improvements. As you may know, Total is a leader in the solar energy, so that's the third pillar, I would say, of increasing renewable in our portfolio through the participation we have in the listed company SunPower. For us, the idea is not actually to have a huge shift in terms of capital allocation, but to accompany the energy mix and to have part, actually, about 5% of our capital employed in gas, renewable, and power in order to address and to accompany the evolution in the mix. Providing solutions to clients and in countries where we operate. This is in particular the case of Africa for us, where we develop social business that promote access to clean energy, and the idea is to provide actually energy to more and more people. As you can see here, we have the ambition to reach 25 million people in Africa through this Avengo program, which is solar lamps. And finally, we need, of course, to reduce ourselves our own emissions. We set the objective to improve energy efficiency of 1% per year and to reduce routine flaring by 80% between 2010 and 2020 and to eliminate it by 2030. So finally, it's clear that R&D is absolutely crucial if we want to improve in combating climate change. We dedicate about 25% of our R&D program on clean tech and environmental issue. As you can see here, we intend to spend more than $7 billion between 2015 and 2019, and it's clear that dedicating R&D to a very large extent to this topic is key for it to improve. So here, the purpose of my comments are not to tell you what companies should do. This is just an illustration of the way that Total very practically sees the issue and how do we get organized in order to handle this problem as much as we can, knowing that at the end our objective is to supply clean, sustainable, affordable energy to as many people as we can.
Well, thank you very much. The issue of perhaps time frames we might come back on after, because I've sort of felt with this issue, all these issues on emissions, that we're kind of running against a clock, and I'm not quite sure, when midnight comes. According to the IEA and the other projections, we'll probably hear from some of you on that. But the other question I think will come up at the end is Total is part of one of the large energy producers, but there are others as well. And are they as being as faithful to the IEA standards and hitting, the 2-degree limit as you are? That's another question. I don't want you to insult any of your competitors, but I just don't know. I don't have any numbers on that. But thank you for that presentation.